Rachel Fay joins us now live. She is the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnerships at Power to Decide. Rachel, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Rachel, what are your thoughts on this one-year anniversary of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade? What have you been seeing exactly?
Well, I think the harm that we've seen the last year has been dramatic and inequitable, like every other aspect of reproductive health care. So as you said, we now have 14 states where there's no abortion providers able to provide care, and more states trying to join that group every day or to severely restrict abortion access. And the result is people having to travel, thousands of miles to get care. And that's the people who can travel. As our CEO, who's a practicing OBGYN, would tell you, what she worries most about are the people that can't travel to get care and are forced to carry pregnancies that they don't want or are a risk to their health to term. So, that in and of itself is just heartbreaking. And then to see providers have to say no to their patients when they're qualified to provide care, to not provide, high quality miscarriage management for fear of legal repercussions. All of these things are playing out. And I think it's just been a heartbreaking year.
Yeah, to your point, this ruling also impacts miscarriage care for women, which could be potentially life-threatening, and it's something a lot of people don't really take into account. There was a study that was done by the Kaiser Family Foundation that found that 42% of OBGYNs are concerned about those legal risks that you just mentioned, and sometimes they have to make these difficult decisions even when the health of the mother is at risk. How do you see this playing out, Rachel? What type of impact do you think that this is going to have on the medical profession as a whole?
Well, we're already beginning to see people choosing where they want to practice medicine or where they want to study medicine and trying to avoid doing so in states with bans or severe restrictions, which is only going to exacerbate the challenges that people in those states face in terms of accessing reproductive health care overall, as well as, the nation as a whole faces a maternal mortality crisis that's particularly dire for Black women, who are 3 times more likely than white women to die in childbirth or immediately after. So, we're seeing trends that I think are only going to make reproductive health care and the outcomes that we have in this country, which are already, pretty terrible, even worse. And I think people are really angry and upset about that.
Well, I wanted to talk about what's happening at the federal level right now, because President Biden is going to be signing his 3rd executive order on abortion rights today, and this one's going to have to do with contraception. What type of effect are these executive orders having?
So I think the devil is always in the details with executive orders. So we'll be watching to see how we can help, federal agencies to operationalize this, but it's an excellent executive order, and the focus is on improving access to contraception and protecting it. I think what people may be less aware of is that in addition to restrictions on abortion access, which were pervasive even before the Dobbs decision, that there are significant barriers to contraceptive access as well. Roughly 19 million women in the U.S. who are in need of publicly funded family planning live in what we call contraceptive deserts. Those are counties where they lack reasonable access to a clinic that offers the full range of contraceptive methods. So we were already in a tough position when it comes to contraception. And so we're really excited that the administration is taking these steps. We think they are, desperately needed, and we'll be ready to work with them to make sure that this really is operationalized and women are able to get the reproductive health care they need. But I will say that at the federal level, there's only so much that can be done right now when it comes to abortion access. And it's really, really important for people to think not just about their federal elected officials, but their state elected officials and what those state legislatures are doing right now. So we've seen a wave of attempts to restrict abortion access at the state level. And that's somewhere where people need to continue to engage with their lawmakers.
So what do you think the future looks like then in terms of abortion access in the United States? Are you hopeful that America goes back to when Roe v. Wade was still in effect? Speaking of political implications, how do you feel the 2024 presidential race is going to play into all of this?
So I think what we are seeing time and again in the polls you just referenced, in the polls that we saw after the midterm elections, people want abortion to be legal. They oppose the Dobbs decision. And I think more and more understand the nuance associated with pregnancy and childbearing, and how that is really something that shouldn't be left to policymakers, but rather to patients and their doctors. And so I think, what we're seeing since the Dobbs decision is not really a change in where people are in terms of their position on this issue, but the level of intensity of feeling about this as the harms play out in real time. And I think that has consequences for policymakers that they need to think long and hard about. But I also think, when we talk about the future, we need to be thinking about building back better than Roe. Roe was the floor, not the ceiling. For millions of people, it still wasn't enough to get them abortion access when they needed it, particularly if they lived in states that banned Medicaid coverage of abortion, if they lived in states where there were severe restrictions that put up barrier after barrier and hurdle after hurdle to their care. So I think now, in the wake of Dobbs, we need to be thinking about what it really looks like to make abortion care meaningfully accessible for everyone. And that's the world we're going to build back in the coming years. And that's what I'm hopeful and optimistic about, particularly given the level of engagement that we've seen sustained in the last year when it comes to this issue.
All right, Rachel Fay is the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnerships at Power to Decide. Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.